Borderline betrayal by people who have the patterns of or are diagnosed with borderline personality disorder is very real and is unfortunately at the heart of all of the relationship impossibility. So what happens for people that get involved with somebody with BPD and you don't know what's going to happen when you do that? Well, you're carrying some kind of woundedness from your childhood, and there is that codependency. And so this commenter is going to say later on in this mix of audio video, the commenter is going to say that it's mind bending and whatnot. And of course it is, because if you have any susceptibility at all to this, they betray you and they blame you for it. They betray you and it's your fault. Yes, that's what they do, and that's what they may believe, or it might be out of their repetition compulsions and might be unconscious. They might not understand it. But this commenter is going to go on, and so this video is going to examine not only BPD betrayal, but what are you supposed to do with that betrayal? And where does this commenter get to? Because he or she, well, because they were betrayed by somebody with BPD and they're really hurting, and the comments suggest that they're still running it through their head. And so what happens when this is happening to someone like the commenter, or you maybe relate to this? The cognitive dissonance, the rumination, you can't stop thinking about them, even if you know in your head you can't go back. You can't recycle it, period, or you can't recycle it again and again because you have so many times and it never works out. And people with BPD are going to betray you, betray you, betray you, blame, blame, blame you. Everything they do, they're going to think or say, or in a repetition compulsion, yell at you or intimate or infer, and it's all your fault. There is an inherent susceptibility in people with codependency and or any other kind of childhood woundedness that is being carried largely in the unconscious. So CPTSD, PTSD, some kind of pain from childhood, family of origin, you're going to be susceptible to this. Well, it's a little bit late to talk about that, isn't it? If you are now the ex or the on and off, or an ex who wants that person back, or the favorite person that got splits evaluation and trade, you already know, or you should know by now, that you have a susceptibility to this, especially when you can't, or you haven't chosen to get into therapy yet. You can't break the trauma bond, the betrayal bond, the fantasy bond, which these are not all different bonds. These are all different aspects of unhealthy bonding. And what have you done? Well, you've interjected the blame and shame and that it's all your fault from the betrayal of the person or persons that are or were in your life who betrayed you. And what does that lead to? It leads to what this commenter decides to share on my YouTube channel, which is fine, but which is also very indicative, and I bet a lot of people can relate to this. Vilifying the borderline is the trap of borderline betrayal when you've interjected it, when you've taken it on, when you've absorbed it, when you're believing it, you're living it because you're also wanting to deny it at the same time. Borderline betrayal is real. It is horrific. It has consequences for all that you might have invested in somebody, and you might not be over it at all, but you've interjected, aside from childhood interjection of that's taking on and absorbing and having within you and believing in a part of yourself that you are to blame, or you should have known better, or you could have done better, or if you still want to recycle the relationship and you're still in contact and all this other stuff, which is just not good for you. That you still want to fix it, you want to change them, but you have to realize that you have some woundedness inside of yourself as well. And what is the other big trapping dilemma of borderline betrayal? That you have a susceptibility, it's codependency, and what all that means, to not be able to break the fantasy bond, the betrayal bond. You keep wanting to know, I could, I would, I should have, if I only, if this, if that. And the other thing about it is, like, you're gonna hear more in this commenter's response. The commenter is still maybe trying to process, but still ruminating and focusing on the BPDX. He takes the path, he falls into the big rabbit hole trap of vilify the person with BPD. Now, I'm not a BPD apologist. I make no excuses for their behavior, but as you will hear if you listen on, it's not accurate to vilify borderlines beyond what they actually know that they're doing or what they're actually responsible for. You can vilify all you want, actually, obviously, right? But I'm here to tell you that when you've interjected this so much and you've absorbed it and taken it on personally, what the borderline has done and or said and how they betrayed you, and it's quote all your fault unquote, which it isn't, but people feel that way. This is just the elongation of you making choices that continue to make you hurt more on top of what the person with BPD did create in wounding you and hurting you and betraying you. Vilifying the borderline is a trap and it's not a way out. Can you relate to vilifying the borderline? I hope you keep listening because you're going to find out what this commenter believes about his borderline ex that truly is now his issue. It's hurting him. It's wounding him. If you can relate to this commenter, then you're doing things that are hurting you and wounding you too with the susceptibility, or if you're susceptible, as a commenter says, which is the codependency, is what I'm here to say. If you've interjected this, you've taken it on, you've absorbed it, it's multi-layered, it's not all about the borderline, it goes back to childhood woundedness as well. And then the commenter will go on to say that this is just borderline basics in the way that the commenter vilifies people with BPD, which is understandable, right? But I'm here to tell you, it's not going to help you hurt any less. It's not going to help you stop ruminating. Not going to help the cognitive dissonance. It's not going to do anything but hurt you more. So with that, then, it's really important to understand that rethinking it over and over and, oh, could you have done this differently? Could you have done that differently? Oh, well, the borderline, they're sadistic, they're evil, they enjoy cheating on you or betraying you in other ways and making it your fault. Somehow that's quote fun for them, unquote, or something. No, and anybody that really believes this, if you resonate with this commenter and for this commenter, the vilification of the BPDX or parent or friend or whomever it might have been in your life, as well as or aside from a significant other relationship, vilifying them will only continue to increase your pain and suffering. And then how do you see your way to turning around and blaming that on the borderline too? Because they're not responsible for what you do after everything that's happened and they betrayed you and definitely hurt you very badly. And there's no excuse for that. But if you're vilifying the borderline, you've fallen into the trap of having absorbed, taken on all that they've said and or blamed you for or shamed you with in their betrayal, and you're just going to continue to be obsessed on it if you're vilifying them because it's not going to help you heal whatsoever. And then the commenter will go on to say that this is just borderline basics in the way that the commenter vilifies people with BPD. First of all, this is not the basics of BPD. And secondly, whatever is the core of BPD and how you've experienced someone like in your life as you're talking about, or how others have as well, this commenter is leaving out the other part. That for any fantasy or trauma bond, betrayal bond, there's two people there. There's everything that people with BPD will do. Inability to relate, inability to love, untreated, of course, right? And until unless really well treated. But the thing is, if that's the core basics of BPD to this commenter, A, that's not really correct. And B, is it a common pattern in BPD? Sure. And it's horrible. Like I said, I'm not making any excuses for BPD behavior. But the other part is this commenter said, that's it for me, right? What they're describing here Well, but they've left out the whole other half, which is themselves. And they're going to say something towards the end of this comment about, well, it's going to be mind bending or something if you're susceptible. Well, you've all been susceptible. You have a part in why you can't let go, why you're still obsessed. The cognitive. I'm not saying you're responsible for everything. Of course not. People with BPD do a ton of things that hurt people. Then you have choices. And then there's things that you need to do to take care of yourself. And this commenter just said, oh, that's the basics of BPD. You know, like, that's it, right? That's the only reason that you had to go through all this is because of them. Well, yes and no. And on the no side of that equation is your codependency, is your unwillingness to make a decision to save yourself instead of trying to change somebody else to be who you thought they were or who you need or want them to be. Are all women with BPD promiscuous? Well, no, they're not. But are many of them? Yes. Do many of them monkey branch? Do many of them cheat? Do they even emotionally cheat sometimes and not the full-on entirety of cheating? Yes. And do they often blame me for it? Yes. So they left this comment on the video I did, borderlines are not relationship worthy. Well, let me just underscore that again. People with BPD are relationship unworthy unless they really healed and recovered. But I'm not saying they're unworthy as people. Of course, they have worth as human beings. Well, the commenter says, I tell you what the head mangler is. The BPD is cheating on the favorite person and blaming the favorite person and telling the man she's with why she's cheating and the favorite person is innocent. Boy, that sounds like a lot of chaotic drama for sure. Commenter continues, my ex even said once that she met a man and it was my doing. Well, unfortunately, with a lot of people with borderline personality disorder, there just is no accountability or responsibility taken for anything. So when she met a man, she blamed you somehow. It was like you're doing, like your fault. Like what? You set it up, like you made it happen? Sometimes I don't even know if they believe it, but whether they believe it or not, that's not the way it works. It's not your fault. You didn't do that. And the commenter continues, it was like she enjoyed the fact I caused the cheating. That's really interesting because I don't think they enjoy the fact that they might erroneously believe that you caused the cheating, but they put that out onto an ex or a favorite person or somebody closest to them, whoever they're going to kind of give it to, so to speak, and blame because they just can't take accountability or responsibility for what their actual choices are because they don't think they're making choices. They think stuff is just happening to them. And it is the victim mentality that is rife and ever so right there with people with untreated or not well enough treated BPD or patterns of not yet diagnosed. But I don't think it's because they enjoy it. You said it was like she enjoyed the fact that caused the cheating. I don't really think so, but they are so often they don't know why the heck they've done what they've done. It happens often unconsciously for them, but this is an explanation, not an excuse. But they often will really believe. Maybe they don't believe it at first and they'll say it, but like, you made me cheat. Or, well, hey, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be doing this, that kind of thing. Because they're just trying to, like, maybe assuage guilt they feel, might not be identified as guilt, but they can sometimes feel shame and guilt and bad about things, but not to ever take responsibility for them, not to change their actions. So if they feel uncomfortable about anything they're doing, whether they know it or not, they'll blame someone else. Do they really enjoy it? No, but they got to externalize it out because they can't handle it, which, by the way, is an explanation. There's no excuse for people treating people this way. That's probably more what's behind that. And the commenter said you really have to completely disconnect from the BPD fairy tale, among other things it's called. It's a fantasy bond. Because when you got into the relationship or you started dating them, you were under like a fantasy of, wow, this person is whoever they are, super attractive. In most cases, they're really amazing. When people have codependency, the idealization of a borderline in the beginning of meeting them, it's like what you've needed all your life on some level as a codependent to not only just be seen and heard, but it's like they make it seem like everything's about you and you're the greatest thing since sliced bread until all of a sudden that changes and that goes away. And then you're like, well, always trying to get back those wonderful feelings of the fantasy bond, which people don't know unless they've been with a cluster B prior. People don't know what they're getting into in these relationships at all. And that's what makes a split to devaluation in episodes like very shocking. And that final split to devaluation to ghosting and or to full outright discard, and then the wondering and the longing and the how do I get them back, and the, which is really not healthy for anybody, but it's hard to break the fantasy bond. So yes, the commenter is saying you really need to disconnect from the BPD fairy tale, but even as an ex, you are still used as an excuse for them to be promiscuous. Well, it sounds like this is definitely what you've experienced. And again, I don't know that what you've experienced is the same as what I'm sure someone else has experienced what you've said, but if people might be relating to this right now. But as an ex, and if you're still being used as an excuse for your ex to be promiscuous, the question then becomes, why do you care? Are you still in communication? If you go no contact, there's no reason to care. Like whatever their narrative is, whatever they believe, whatever they're doing. You see, breaking the fantasy bond and healing codependency will also help people to stop caring about if they're still being used as an excuse for, in this case, an ex's promiscuity or whatever else in the world it might be. Because you can't keep letting that define you as if you have anything to do with it. That's just crazy making. And the commenter says it's so sick, their minds get double sadistic pleasure from the cheating. Their minds get double sadistic pleasure from the cheating. No, I don't think so. Because actually, they're obviously looking for the physical relations pleasure of the cheating, but even that is never enough to satisfy them, nor does that continue in any congruent way to be that fantastic, intense, physical relation experience, and often as it can be for a time, but usually people with BPD can't keep that up, at least not with the same person, because there's much behind that. But then they will split, devalue you, and or be monkey branching and or promiscuous and cheating, whether you've actually had a breakup or whether they've actually broken up with you or discarded you or ghosted you or not. So it's not that their minds get double sadistic pleasure from the cheating. I think other parts of their bodies might get that. But remember, too, that so much of that intense, fantastic physical relating and or when they're cheating is really them being hypersexual. And what that's really about is not really connecting a lot other than the physicality of connection, right? To loving, to the broadest sense of that experience, what people hope it will be. Because often people with BPD, especially the more hypersexual they are, and women, I guess some men might fit this with BPD, but they're needing more and more of that. Why? Well, not for a very healthy reason. It's because the end justifies the means to them, because they need to be soothed and they can't soothe themselves. And often they will engage in often continually wanting, cheating a lot of sexual, physical intimacy with people, and unfortunately cheating and being promiscuous. But it's more so than anything because they need that much soothing. So what does that say for a lot of the sharing of the relation, whether it's with you when you're with them, or like they're being they were promiscuous and or cheating, which is like awful and should never be put up with. It's a betrayal. They're doing it because of how it soothes them. So they're not even really they have physical relations, but they don't really know how to make it love. if you know what I mean, to include the intimacy emotionally into it not just being a physical exercise, because often they're not even there. I've had a lot of clients describe to me how they're not even really present in the physical relations, and they don't really want to linger or hang around or have any intimate emotional moments after the act, so to call it, And are people with BPD sadistic, more to the point, you see? Often not, and some might be. And maybe refer to my video, I'll try to link it under here, on sadistic personality disorder, which I hesitate to really talk much about because now a lot of people are going to go, oh, well, my BPD is definitely this too. And maybe not. They're not all the same. The commenter continues, I'm cheating and it's your fault, like a sadistic parent who hits an innocent child and says, you made me do it. Don't cry or I'll hit you again. I'm cheating and it's your fault. I mean, they can say that or certainly give you that impression. Of course, it has no logical basis whatsoever. So you have to remember that and not absorb that because they're betraying you and you're not making them betray you. Why on earth would anybody do that? Well, borderlines might do that to someone else, but you know what I mean? So they do this, I'm cheating and it's your fault. Like a sadistic parent who hits an innocent child and says, you made me do it, don't cry or I'll hit you again. Well, and is that like sadistic? It can be, but that's done, I think, more often than not by a parent who probably has BPD or NPD or traits thereof. Is that the same that your ex is doing to you as what a parent does to a child? It might have some similarity, but you have to remember you're not a child. Might be kind of drowning in the codependency. You have a lot more choices available to you to not let this narrative continue to be part of your life. The bar is set so high with these folk. You fail and get punished and it's your fault. Is the bar really high? Or is the bar like almost non-existent because in the repetition compulsion of the acting out of their woundedness and how and why people, for the majority of people with BPD, have BPD and what that really means, and I'm not excusing their behavior, it's not a high bar. It's like there's no bar there because you are going to be blamed and said to be or intimated to be and inferred to be at fault for everything because they are often unconsciously, maybe they know a little bit, but they're externalizing out the pain, the agony, the anger, the tumult, the stress, the terror inside because they think that you caused them that. When they don't consciously understand that that is something that's been triggered that's happening again for them from their past. So they shoot it out at whoever is the person, like the ex or like this commenter or whoever's closest to them or the next person. You're going to hear all about the bad ex when none of the narrative is right, but they project and they externalize it out and blame because they have to get it out of the lack of self. And that doesn't make it right. It's horrible, but it also doesn't make it as purposeful, as sadistic, as on purpose as it might seem like it is. But whether it's on purpose and they know it or not, you need to deal with how it's affecting you. You need to deal with getting away from this person, going no contact. And I'm not suggesting, I don't know where the commenter might have done this or might not have done this. Maybe had some healing, maybe not. But anyone else that can relate to this, that's what's important because you don't want to be thinking about it a lot because it's their stuff. And it has no application in the here and now reality or the then and there reality when you were in a relationship with them. It's crazy making, but it means nothing. And that's what you need to learn is to observe it, but don't absorb it. Don't take it on. Don't be repeating the narrative. And usually people have to go no contact. And if this is still happening for someone, it's probably an indicator there's still more healing work to do. So you can just not be affected by it anymore, which does take work. If it's subconscious, then they've tapped into some evil intelligence. Not at all. Not at all. This is where I really like to make the delineations that aren't popular. Because you can choose, not just to comment anybody, you can choose to take in and hear what I'm saying right now, or you can keep believing what you want and it'll keep hurting you. It's your choice. If it's subconscious, and more to the point, it's often unconscious, and then they've tapped into some evil intelligence. No, they haven't. They are reliving usually a lot of woundedness, adverse experience from childhood, cause arrested emotional development that is at the core of borderline personality disorder. And then in that case, they're unconsciously re experiencing that past adverse experience and then some. And in repetition compulsion cycles, they keep reenacting themselves, in which they keep externalizing things out onto other people. Projective identification and then some, but it's not about any, quote, evil, unquote, and it's not about any evil intelligence at all. It isn't even in their conscious awareness. And the commenter says, they say we are narcissists, etc., but I wonder sometimes if it's an excuse to be evil and blame you for it. I don't know why so many people with borderline personality think that all the people they've been with, the exes or their parents or the neighbors or the friends, they think everybody's a narcissist. I don't understand what that's about, but come on, this is like social media age, and I think people with BPD get online and they hear other people with BPD. There must be some narrative out there that started this, like, why do the people with BPD always think everybody's a narcissist? Or sometimes it's a repetition compulsion projected out onto you as partner and then maybe ex as the object of their bad parent representation because maybe they had a narcissistic parent. So it can be that kind of projection as well. But, if a person with BPD or obvious traits of, and they put you through hell and they turn around and call you a narcissist, then I have lots of clients that struggle with this because they really believe they are, because they say, well, again, emotionally you can react, of course, but you have to use your critical thinking skills. And again, people with codependency often need therapy to know themselves strongly enough, in a healthy enough way, to know for sure they're not a narcissist, even if a borderline calls them one. But let's just say more often than not, when borderlines call an ex or a partner or someone else close to them a narcissist, more often than not, that's absolutely not true. Are some of them with actual narcissists and then they're correct? Well, yes, that can happen too. So the commenter said, but I wonder if it's an excuse to be evil and blame you for it. No, because they're blaming you isn't an evil act. And they don't need any excuse to blame in projecting and projective identification and externalizing out their turmoil, because that just happens automatically, because that's what happened in their childhoods, because they have no self to contain it, no way to understand it, no way to cope with it. Phew, it's your fault. You did it. I don't know. I didn't. You made me do it. It's not about evil. It's not about planning. And it's not about any excuse. They don't do excuses. I mean, they might have lots to say, but they really don't do excuses, do they? They just do fall into the repetition compulsion cycles that they do fall into, whether it's cheating, being promiscuous, or other things, raging, going cold on you, silent treatment, whatever it is. It's not calculated and it's not personal. Oh, it's going to hurt. You're going to take it personally, of course, because you're there, but it's not even about you. And that's what people need to learn more about. Because I wonder how this narrative that you're presenting here, comment, or anybody that resonates with it, how's it going to help you to stop thinking about this person? Where are you at with that? How's it going to help you to just live your life or do more healing work that you might need to be more actively involved in living your life and not thinking about what this person with BPD did and said and blamed you for? Because at the end of the day, once you heal, recover, go no, who cares? But you obviously still do care. That can be painful, and that's something you need to maybe look into, changing for yourself. And then the commenter says, just to finish the sentence, I'll go back. They say we are the narcissists, etc., but I wonder sometimes if it's an excuse to be evil and blame you for it. It's the ultimate sadism. It has absolutely nothing to do with sadism. Sadism is going to be something that is a part of when somebody has malignant narcissistic personality, comorbid with being a psychopath, as well as fitting the criteria for what is known as the dark tetrad. And the dark tetrad is malignant narcissistic personality disorder with psychopathy, sadism, sadistic nature, and Machiavellianism. And that's where you find sadism, not in people with borderline personality disorder at all. Maybe it appears they're behaving that way. Maybe you believe that they're thinking that way. This is erroneous, okay? Straight up erroneous. How is it helping you to think that somebody with BPD has the power or the wherewithal or the capacity or ability to be so sadistic? Because they don't. And are some of them diagnosed with BPD and they're so severe that they probably are psychopathic, especially women who don't get the proper diagnosis? That could be true. That could go on to mean something else. But what you're describing here, as horrible as it is and was for you, and it still seems to be for you, and is for many other people, when people have been promiscuous, monkey branch, cheated, the betrayal of that and so much more that people with BPD inflict upon people, it has nothing to do with sadism. It has nothing to do with any excuses. It has nothing. I mean, they'll make excuses because they don't know what they're doing, and they're responsible for that, but they can't take responsibility for that. It's not evil either. It's abusive. It's a horrible way to treat somebody and to shame and blame somebody as they're externalizing out, like vomiting their own inner feelings. But it's not evil and it's not sadistic. If you say, like this commenter, where you're coming from, I'm concerned for you because you're giving this way too much power. What are you doing to help yourself move on, to heal? And if you resonate with this comment and you're like, yeah, I think they're really sadistic and it's so evil. And it's at the BPD level, it is still horrible, inexcusable, non-negotiable, should be the end of any relationship. Go no contact, get gone, and get into your own healing recovery journey. But it's not this sadistic evil. What is it in you and your pain and or still leftover anger, which is quite understandable, that you need to keep vilifying this person? Because it's what? What's it doing for you? How's it helping you? It can't be helping you. You're still focused on them. Why aren't you working, or are you working yet, to heal and recover more, to be no, I don't know if you're no contact or not. If you're not, you need to be, and you need to be getting this out of your head, out of your beingness, healing it. Because dwelling and vilifying this way serves no one. And it's not true about most people with BPD, and I'll straight up say that all day long. But at the same time, I'm not making any excuses for the way that they treat people. But the way that you then, as this commenter has, contextualize, conceptualize, go further and further, probably with hearing some disinformation out there too, that all borderlines are just evil and this and that and whatever. That's just only going to continue to have you wrapped up in this and be hurting you to some degree or other. It certainly sounds like you're not over this. And if you're not, that's, no judgment, but you need to get into healing and recovery work. And the commenter continued, this for me is the basis of BPD relationships. It'll be evil and it's your fault. Well, neither is true. It's not evil and it's not your fault. But is it injurious, harmful, negatively impacting, traumatizing? Yes, it is. And that's what you have to go to therapy to heal, so you're not still obsessed with and dwelling on this. And vilifying this ex of yours is not going to help you feel better at all. It's mind-bending if you are even slightly suggestible. Well, interesting you would say that, because yes, it's mind-bending, and I think at the beginning of your comment you said a head mangler, but it doesn't have to continue to be mind-boggling or a head mangler. When you go no contact and when you seek your own healing recovery, you can be free of it, but you need to break the fantasy bond. And I don't know, commenter, but clearly it seems like maybe you haven't done that yet. And I'm not judging you. I'm just saying, and this is continuing your suffering, which is something that I think I sort of intuit the possibility of based on your entire comment. And not because I think there's anything wrong with it, except that you are probably hurting you even more with what you're believing and continuing to roll around in your head, it seems like. And I mean that with compassion and empathy. And you said it's mind bending if you're even slightly suggestible. Well, everybody with codependency is suggestible. Everybody with childhood woundedness that they might not realize they have or don't understand or they're disavowing, it's been suppressed down into sub or unconsciousness from childhood. You're going to be very suggestible, susceptible to meeting somebody who idealizes you. And because you have an emotional hunger, many people do with codependency, most people have this emotional hunger to be seen and heard. It goes back to a woundedness in childhood in different ways. It's not the same for everybody. And so it's mind-bending if you are even slightly suggestible. Everybody who gets into this is suggestible. And you don't know yourself well enough. And you've had childhood woundedness. These dots just connect. I mean, almost 100% of the time, so close to 100% of the time. It doesn't have to continue to be mind-bending, and you don't have to continue to house within yourself the consequences of not only what they did to you, because they really hurt you and betrayed you, but also the pain and the lack of healing that you're still holding on to, that it's mind-bending to you still because it seems like you're still somewhere in the fantasy bond of the suggestibility of it all. Because maybe I'm taking one step too far, but I don't know if you resonate with this commenter and you feel as you know, the way that they've conceptualized the context in which they've expressed what they're feeling, what they're thinking, what they think it means. Well, that's problematic for people that are in that narrative, because you're going to continue to be in the mind mangling of it, in the mind bending nature of it, because you're still fantasy bonded. And that means there's still suggestibility operating inside of you that makes people write these comments, go over it. Like, don't you want to be free of this? And if you can relate to this and what the commenter is saying, and to the commenter, not my place to say anything about whether you do A or B in your life or not. But I would just suggest that it doesn't have to stay mind-bending. It doesn't have to be mind-mangling. They're not evil. You got blamed, but you're still absorbing that. That's still somewhere inside of you, and it doesn't belong to you or with you. And so it sounds like you would benefit from working with someone, or if you are working with someone, continue that, because you haven't yet broke the trauma, or also known as the betrayal or fantasy bond. If you want to believe what you believe, that's your business, but I'm just telling you really honestly and accurately that the way you're painting this person with BPD, they betrayed you, they hurt you, they did horrible things. There's no excuse for that. I understand that, and it sounds like you're really still feeling the effects. And I'm sorry that you ever had to go through this, and that you are wherever you are with this, that it's still probably painful and going through your mind, and you're still holding it within you when it doesn't belong to you, and it was never true about you, and why you were betrayed was not your fault. And the extra sort of vilification here of this ex of yours with BPD, which I'm not judging, all I'm addressing that for is to say that when people are extra vilifying in this kind of narrative of they're so evil and they're going to blame, and if you're suggestible and it's mind-bending, and yes, all of that is very true, except they're not necessarily evil. But we can't make excuses for their behavior or for the way that they hurt. This person hurt you, and many others with BPD will hurt many other people. It's so important to start working your way through to break the fantasy betrayal bond, because otherwise you're going to keep thinking this, and it's because a part of you has still this inside of you. You've interjected it from how they blamed you and what they said to you, And that likely is multi-layered back to something in your childhood, and anyone that can relate to this, wherein you have unhealed betrayal, abandonment, or not being seen or heard, something that you needed emotionally that you didn't get, or some emotional betrayal by a parent that might be really inadvertent and not having been done on purpose or in any cruel way. But as much as people with BPD can certainly treat other people in ways that are very unkind, so to maybe cruelty, doesn't mean evil. But the thing is, you need to get it out of you and let go of their narrative. And now the one that you're layering and building on top to vilify them back to what? Because that's the part that doesn't equate to healing from the fantasy or betrayal bond. So I hope that that will be helpful. I hope you understand the way in which I deliver the message. I'm not judging the comment or anybody that relates to this. If you stay in this narrative, that's your choice. But please know you're making a choice. You're absolutely making a choice. They hurt you, they wound you, they blame you, they do all this inexcusable stuff. But unless you go to therapy and you heal the codependency and you go back to the woundedness and family of origin issues and you heal that so that you can break the fantasy or betrayal bond, process your way to that end in therapy so you can then let it go. You will have done all the work, grieved, understood how all the dots connect. How did you get there? Do the healing work so that you can actually really truly not keep thinking about a borderline X and be able to go on with your life in a much healthier way independently, having healed from the relationship, the breakup, things in your childhood, etc., and more to the point, having healed your codependency to become an independent person. And you can also I work with a lot of clients in the cognitive work, and you'll learn a lot about this to take forward in your life, how not to let yourself interject what other people say about you or how they define you. This is a part of codependency also, and how to have enough self-esteem and self-worth and much more to be able to not fall into patterns of rumination and the cognitive dissonance and all of the actual painful realities of having been hurt and traumatized by somebody with borderline personality disorder.